Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Place. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day filled with 1,000 little decisions, or maybe you're simply the kind of person who likes falling asleep to deep thoughts and gentle mysteries rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. Tonight, we're stepping into the quiet world of plants, those silent companions who have shared this planet with us since long before we arrived. We're going to explore a question that sounds almost like poetry. Can plants really think? Now, before you imagine a sunflower pondering the meaning of life or a rose bush solving equations, let me reassure you, we're not talking about thought in the way you and I experience it. But what we are talking about is equally beautiful, equally mysterious, and perhaps even more soothing to contemplate as you settle into your pillows tonight. Plants may not have brains, but they sense their world. They respond. They remember. They communicate in whispers we're only just beginning to understand. And as we move through tonight's facts together, you'll discover that the green world around us is far more aware, far more connected than most of us ever imagined. Each fact is a small window into this hidden life, a gentle invitation to see the everyday forests and gardens and houseplants around us with new wonder. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this journey already, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. It helps other sleepy souls find their way here too. But there's no pressure. Tonight is about letting go, about drifting, about allowing your mind to wander through soft green spaces while your body sinks deeper into rest. So adjust your pillow one last time. Let your shoulders drop. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. For the next little while, you can simply listen, or half listen, or let these words become a gentle current that carries you towards sleep. The plants have been growing slowly, patiently, for millions of years. They know all about taking things slowly, and tonight so can you. Let's begin. Imagine a world without nervous systems, without neurons firing in rapid succession, without anything resembling what we call a brain. Now imagine that in this world, awareness still exists, not as thoughts racing through corridors of gray matter, but as something slower, something more patient, something that unfolds like a flower opening to the morning sun. This is the world of plants, where intelligence may look nothing like our own, yet reveals itself in 1,000 quiet ways. When scientists speak of plant cognition, they're careful with their words, hedging their claims with may and could and suggests, because they know consciousness is slippery territory. But what they've discovered is that plants can sense at least 15 different environmental variables: light intensity and direction, gravity, temperature, humidity, chemical gradients, pathogens, herbivores, and more. Each root tip, each leaf, each growing shoot is constantly gathering information, constantly adjusting, constantly responding to an intricate web of signals we can barely imagine. The Venus flytrap offers us perhaps the most dramatic example of plant decision-making, a moment when the green world seems to pause and consider before acting. When an insect brushes against the trigger hairs inside the trap, the plant doesn't snap shut immediately. Instead, it counts. One touch could be a false alarm, a drop of rain, a bit of debris carried by wind. But if a second touch follows within about 20 seconds, the trap makes its choice and closes in 1/10 of a second, one of the fastest movements in the plant kingdom. What's remarkable isn't just the speed, but the memory. The plant must remember that first touch, hold that information for precious seconds, then integrate it with new sensory input before committing to the metabolically expensive action of closing its trap. This is not thinking as we know it, but it is a form of information processing, a kind of botanical calculation happening without a single neuron, a decision made in green silence. Beneath your feet right now, if you could shrink down and peer into the soil, you would find a network so vast and intricate it resembles the neural networks in your own brain. The Wood Wide Web, as some scientists call it, is an underground system of fungal threads, mycorrhizae, that connect tree roots across entire forests, allowing them to share resources and information. A mother tree, large and well-established, may send carbon to her offspring through these fungal highways, especially when the young trees are shaded and struggling to photosynthesize. But the network carries more than just sugar and nutrients. When one tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical warning signals through the mycorrhizal network to its neighbors, prompting them to ramp up their own defensive compounds before the herbivores arrive. It's not conscious communication in any sense we recognize, but it is cooperative behavior, a kind of forest-scale information sharing that suggests trees exist not as isolated individuals, but as members of a community, a collective, each one influencing and being influenced by all the others around it. Plants can hear, or at least, they can sense vibrations in ways that influence their growth and survival. In one elegant study, researchers exposed plant roots to the sound of running water and watched as the roots grew toward the sound, even when no actual moisture was present. The plants were responding to acoustic signals, using sound as a cue to find resources. Even more intriguing, some plants may produce sounds themselves, tiny clicks and pops caused by cavitation in their water-conducting tissues when they're drought-stressed. Sounds too quiet for human ears but potentially detectable by other plants or by insects. And there's evidence that certain plants can distinguish between the vibrations of a chewing caterpillar and the vibrations of wind or insect mating calls, responding specifically to the threat of herbivory by increasing their production of defensive chemicals. This is not hearing in the way you hear these words, but it is a form of acoustic perception, a sensitivity to the vibrational landscape that surrounds every leaf and stem and root. The sensitive plant Mimosa pudica folds its leaves at the slightest touch, a defense mechanism that may startle herbivores or make the plant look less appealing. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. The plant can learn. In experiments, researchers repeatedly dropped the sensitive plant from a small height, triggering the leaf folding response. At first, the plant reacted every time, but after several drops, when the plant realized no harm was coming, it stopped responding. It had learned that this particular stimulus was harmless. Even more remarkably, the plant remembered this lesson for several weeks, even when conditions changed, different light levels, different moisture, different times of day. This is habituation, a basic form of learning that neuroscientists study in animals with brains. Yet here it is in a plant, accomplished through networks of electrical and chemical signals flowing through cells, through membranes, through the green architecture of life, finding a way to adapt and remember without anything we'd call a mind. When a plant is wounded, when a deer takes a bite from a leaf or a caterpillar chews through tender tissue, the plant knows. Within seconds, an electrical signal races from the site of damage through the plant's vascular system, traveling at speeds up to a centimeter per second. It's slow compared to animal nervous systems, where signals move at many meters per second, but for a plant, it's a urgent dispatch, an alarm spreading through the tissues. This signal triggers a cascade of responses. The wounded area may release volatile organic compounds that attract predatory insects to come eat the caterpillar, while unwounded leaves begin ramping up production of toxins and digestive inhibitors to make themselves less palatable. Some plants can even distinguish between different types of damage, mechanical tearing versus insect chewing, and tailor their responses accordingly. This is wound perception, a distributed awareness of harm that flows through phloem and xylem, through cell walls and membranes, allowing the plant to mount a defense without a centralized command center, without a brain to coordinate the response. Light is language for plants, and they are fluent in ways that put our visual systems to shame. While humans have 3 types of color receptors in our eyes, plants possess at least 11 different classes of photoreceptors, each sensitive to different wavelengths and light conditions. These photoreceptors don't just help the plant photosynthesize. They provide detailed information about the plant's environment, allowing it to sense the quality, quantity, direction, and duration of light. Through these sensors, a plant knows when it's being shaded by a competitor, can detect the difference between morning and evening light, and can even sense the proximity of other plants by detecting the ratio of red to far red light reflected from their neighbors' leaves. This is not vision, not seeing in any way you see the room around you, but it is a rich, multi-dimensional perception of the luminous world, a conversation with photons that shapes every aspect of how the plant grows, when it flowers, and how it competes for space in the canopy. There is electricity flowing through plants, tiny currents moving from cell to cell, and these electrical signals may be one way plants integrate information across their bodies. When you touch the leaf of a sensitive plant, or when an insect chews on a tomato, measurable changes in electrical potential sweep through the plant's tissues, rather like the action potentials that travel along your neurons, though much slower and through different mechanisms. These electrical waves can trigger changes in gene expression, hormone levels, and defensive chemistry far from the site of the original stimulus. Some researchers have even compared these networks to a kind of plant nervous system, though the analogy is loose. There are no neurons, no synapses, no brain to receive the signals. Yet the functional outcome is similar, a way for the organism to sense something at one location and respond throughout its body, to integrate information and coordinate a response, to act as a unified whole despite being made of relatively independent modules. Plants can smell, or more precisely, they can detect and respond to airborne chemical signals in ways that profoundly influence their behavior. When sagebrush is clipped to simulate herbivore damage, nearby sagebrush plants detect volatile compounds released from the wounded plant and respond by increasing their own defensive chemicals, even though they haven't been touched themselves. This eavesdropping on chemical alarm signals happens across many species and ecosystems. Lima beans warning lima beans, corn warning corn, tobacco warning tobacco. The chemicals drift through the air like invisible messages, and the receiving plants decode these messages through receptor proteins, triggering cascades of genetic and metabolic changes. It's a form of plant-to-plant communication that operates through the atmosphere, turning a breeze into a carrier of information, transforming a forest or field into a connected system where danger experienced by one can be anticipated by many. Roots don't just grow downward because of gravity. They navigate through soil with something that looks remarkably like purpose. Root tips have been called the brain of the plant by some researchers, though this metaphor is controversial and likely overblown. Still, what happens at the root tip is extraordinary. A small region called the transition zone, just behind the very tip of the root, appears to integrate multiple sensory inputs: gravity, moisture gradients, nutrient concentrations, chemical signals from other organisms, oxygen levels, soil texture, and more. Based on this integration, the root adjusts its growth direction, sometimes minute by minute, threading between obstacles, growing toward water, avoiding toxic compounds, and even in some cases, seeming to avoid the roots of competitors while growing toward the roots of kin. This is environmental problem-solving happening in slow motion, a navigation accomplished not by thinking through options but by continuous sensing and responding, by leaning into favorable conditions and away from unfavorable ones, by feeling a way forward through the dark. Time for plants is not time as you experience it. A day to you is a cycle of waking, activity, and sleep. To a plant, it's a journey of the sun across the sky, a changing quality of light, a set of opportunities and challenges that repeat with reliable rhythm. Plants possess circadian rhythms, internal biological clocks that continue to run even in constant darkness, that prepare the plant for dawn before the sun rises, that open stomata in anticipation of photosynthesis, that coordinate growth and defense and reproduction with the turning of the world. These clocks exist in individual cells, in leaves and roots and petals, all coordinated through chemical signals into a coherent whole. A plant with a functional circadian clock outperforms one with a disrupted clock, suggesting these internal rhythms are deeply adaptive, a way of being in sync with the planet's rotation. In this way, plants remember the day before and anticipate the day ahead, living not just in the moment but in an extended present that stretches across yesterday and tomorrow. Memory in plants may not be stored in synapses, but it exists nonetheless, inscribed in hormones and gene expression and structural changes that persist across time. Plants can remember periods of cold, vernalization it's called, where exposure to winter temperatures is required before the plant will flower in spring. The plant must experience the cold for a minimum duration, must count the weeks of winter in some biochemical way, and only then, when spring warmth returns, will flowering genes be activated. This is memory that spans months, encoded not in electrical patterns but in chemical modifications to DNA and chromatin, in stable configurations of regulatory proteins that persist, until the right signal comes to release them. Other forms of plant memory are shorter. The Venus flytrap's 20-second memory of a first touch, the sensitive plant's weeks-long memory of harmless stimuli. But all of them point to the same truth: that experience changes plants, that history shapes their present behavior, that even without neurons, the past leaves traces in living tissue. Plants can recognize their relatives, and they treat family differently than they treat strangers. When roots of related plants, siblings grown from seeds of the same parent, grow near each other in soil, they tend to be less competitive than when they grow near unrelated plants. They develop smaller root systems, invest less in underground competition, and in some cases even seem to divide resources more equitably. How they recognize kin is still debated, possibly through chemical signatures in root exudates, possibly through ratios of specific compounds that vary between genetic lines. But the recognition itself appears real across multiple species. This has profound implications for how we understand plant behavior. If plants can distinguish self from non-self, kin from stranger, and adjust their growth strategies accordingly, then we're seeing a level of social complexity in the botanical world that challenges our assumption that social behavior requires brains, that cooperation requires consciousness, that family bonds are unique to animals. A plant's sense of touch is exquisitely sensitive, and it shapes not just where the plant grows but how it grows. Thigmomorphogenesis is the scientific term, touch-induced changes in growth patterns. A plant grown in still air develops differently than one buffeted by wind. The wind-exposed plant grows shorter, stockier, with thicker stems and more mechanical tissue to resist the constant flexing. Climbing plants extend tendrils that wave through the air until they brush against a support, and that touch triggers rapid coiling, transforming a searching tendril into a grasping anchor within minutes to hours. Even gentle, repeated touch, like stroking a seedling daily, can slow vertical growth and promote more compact, robust architecture. The plant perceives mechanical stimulation through mechanoreceptor proteins in cell membranes, channels that open when stretched or compressed, initiating signaling cascades that ultimately alter growth patterns. It's a form of haptic learning, the plant sculpting its own body based on the tactile texture of its environment. In autumn, when days grow short and temperatures drop, deciduous trees prepare for winter not as a sudden reaction to cold, but as a carefully orchestrated transition based on anticipation and memory. The trees sense the changing photoperiod, the length of day versus night, through photoreceptor proteins, and this triggers a cascade of developmental changes. Nutrients are withdrawn from the leaves and stored in the trunk and roots. Chlorophyll breaks down, revealing yellows and oranges and reds, and specialized cells form an abscission layer at the base of each leaf stem, eventually allowing the leaf to fall. This is not a simple on-off switch, but a complex developmental program that requires the integration of multiple signals: light, temperature, hormonal status, water availability, and the coordination of thousands of genes turning on and off in sequence. The tree is reading the season, interpreting environmental cues, and preparing itself for months of dormancy through a kind of biological foresight that, while mechanistic, achieves something remarkably like planning. The phenomenon of plant anesthesia offers one of the most intriguing hints that plant responsiveness might share deep roots with animal consciousness. When exposed to anesthetic compounds, the same ones used to induce unconsciousness in humans and other animals, plants stop their characteristic movements. Venus flytraps won't close, mimosa leaves won't fold, climbing tendrils won't coil. Their electrical signaling is disrupted, their rapid responses silenced. Once the anesthetic wears off, normal function returns. This parallel between plant and animal responses to anesthetics has sparked fascinating speculation. Might the molecular mechanisms that enable responsiveness in plants be evolutionarily related to those that enable consciousness in animals? Might both arise from fundamental properties of cellular excitability, from the way membranes and proteins and ions interact to create responsiveness? It's far too early to draw conclusions, but the questions themselves are beautiful, suggesting that the boundary between the responsive and the aware might be less sharp than we imagine. Plants make decisions, though calling them decisions feels strange when there's no deliberating mind behind them. Yet the functional outcome is unmistakable. Faced with options, plants choose. A germinating seed allocates resources between root and shoot growth based on soil moisture and light availability. A vine encountering a fork chooses which path to climb. A tree invests in fruit production or vegetative growth based on resource availability and competitive pressure. These choices maximize fitness, optimize resource use, and respond flexibly to circumstances. The mechanisms are biochemical, hormones, gene expression, signal transduction pathways, but the result is behavior that looks strategic. Decision-making without a decider, strategy without a strategist, choice without consciousness. It's a reminder that the functions we associate with minds, perceiving, integrating information, responding adaptively, can emerge from other kinds of organization. That intelligence might be broader than we thought, manifested not in neurons but in the networked interactions of cells and molecules achieving outcomes we'd call smart. Chemical warfare in the plant kingdom is sophisticated and strategic. When an acacia tree is browsed by a giraffe, it increases the tannin content in its leaves, making them bitter and less nutritious. But more than this, the tree also releases ethylene gas, a volatile compound that drifts on the wind to neighboring acacias. Those downwind trees, receiving the chemical signal, begin increasing their own tannin production before the giraffe arrives. Meanwhile, giraffes have learned not to feed too long on a single tree and to approach from upwind, avoiding the warned neighbors. This is an evolutionary arms race playing out in slow motion, plants and herbivores locked in a chemical conversation across generations. The plants don't hate the herbivores, don't fear them in any emotional sense, but the result of millions of years of selection is a defense system that looks remarkably like anticipation, communication, and even cooperation among plants facing a common threat. You're doing beautifully. There's no need to remember every detail, no need to hold on to each fact with full attention. Let the information wash over you like a gentle stream, carrying you deeper into relaxation. Feel the weight of your body against the bed, the softness of the pillow beneath your head. The plants we're exploring have spent 3 billion years perfecting the art of slow, patient existence. They know nothing of rush or urgency. And tonight, neither do you. Breathe slowly, let your thoughts drift like seeds on the wind, and know that sleep will come when it's ready, in its own time, like a flower opening. The concept of plant neurobiology has sparked both excitement and controversy in the scientific community. Some researchers argue that plants exhibit cognitive behaviors, learning, memory, decision-making, communication, and that we should study them using frameworks borrowed from neuroscience, looking for plant equivalents of neural networks and information processing. Other scientists push back strongly, arguing that we risk anthropomorphizing, that using terms like intelligence or cognition for plants muddies clear terminology and misleads the public. But perhaps the debate itself is valuable, pushing us to question what we mean by thinking, by awareness, by intelligence. Maybe intelligence isn't one thing but many, a spectrum of information processing strategies evolved across kingdoms and domains. Maybe the question isn't whether plants think like us, but whether the concept of thinking needs to be broader, more inclusive, more humble in the face of life's diversity. And maybe, on a sleepy night like this, it's enough just to marvel that the silent green world is far less silent, far less passive than we once believed. Plants respond to gravity with such reliability that it seems simple, but the mechanism is wonderfully complex. In the root tip, specialized cells called statocytes contain dense, starch-filled organelles called amyloplasts that settle to the bottom of the cell like tiny stones, finding the lowest point. This settling is gravity perception, the cell sensing which way is down. The asymmetric position of these statocytes triggers an asymmetric distribution of auxin, a growth hormone, which causes cells on the lower side of the root to elongate more slowly than those on the upper side, resulting in a downward bend. Meanwhile, in the shoot, the same hormone causes the opposite effect, bending the stem upward. This is gravitropism, and it happens continuously as the plant grows, constantly adjusting, constantly correcting, ensuring that roots delve down into the earth while shoots reach up toward the light. It's orientation without an inner ear, balance without a brain, an elegant solution to the fundamental challenge of knowing which way is up. Carnivorous plants offer us a window into extreme plant behavior, where the line between passive and active blurs beautifully. The sundew plant's leaves are covered with sticky, glistening droplets on the ends of hair-like tentacles. When an insect lands and becomes trapped, the sundew doesn't just passively digest it. The tentacles slowly bend inward, wrapping around the prey, maximizing contact, ensuring the insect is thoroughly covered in digestive enzymes. This movement takes hours, a slow-motion embrace driven by differential growth rates on either side of each tentacle. The plant has detected prey, assessed the situation, and is actively responding to secure its meal. The pitcher plant takes a different approach, using modified leaves shaped into deep tubes filled with digestive fluid. The rim of the pitcher is slippery, sometimes with downward-pointing hairs, and once an insect tumbles in, escape is nearly impossible. These are not snap decisions but architectural ones, body plans shaped across evolutionary time to transform leaves into traps, to supplement photosynthesis with predation, to survive in nutrient-poor environments by eating what the soil cannot provide. The way plants grow toward light, phototropism, is one of the most familiar plant behaviors, yet its mechanism is poetry. When light strikes one side of a growing shoot, photoreceptors on that side trigger a redistribution of oxygen to the shaded side. The cells on the shaded side, bathed in higher oxygen concentrations, elongate faster than the illuminated cells, causing the shoot to bend toward the light. Charles Darwin studied phototropism in grass seedlings, covering their tips with tiny black caps, and discovering that the perception of light happened at the tip, but the bending response happened below, indicating some kind of signal transmission from the site of perception to the site of action. It was one of the first clear demonstrations that plants could transmit information from one part to another, that they had internal communication systems, that they were integrated organisms and not just collections of independent parts. And when you see a houseplant leaning toward a window, you're witnessing this ancient mechanism still at work, the plant sensing, signaling, and growing toward what it needs. There's a kind of plant memory called stress priming, where an initial exposure to a moderate stress, drought, heat, cold, pathogen attack, leaves the plant better prepared to handle that stress if it returns. The first stress triggers changes in gene expression and metabolic pathways, and even after conditions return to normal, some of these changes persist, making the plant's response to the second stress faster and stronger. In some cases, this priming can even be passed to the next generation through epigenetic modifications, chemical tags on DNA that alter gene expression without changing the DNA sequence itself. Seeds from a stressed plant may germinate with enhanced stress tolerance, carrying a molecular memory of their parents' hardship. This is adaptation happening in real time, within a lifetime, across generations, a kind of learning that isn't encoded in neural circuits but in the chromatin architecture, in the methylation patterns of DNA, in the soft inheritance of acquired resilience. Plants are time travelers in a sense, living simultaneously in the moment and across seasons and years. A tree adds a ring of wood each year, and within those rings is encoded the history of that year. Wide rings for wet, favorable years, narrow rings for droughts, scarred wood where fire passed, compressed rings where competition was fierce. These rings can be read like pages in a book, revealing centuries of climate and ecology, a botanical archive written in cellulose and lignin. And the tree itself may respond differently to current conditions based on this history. A tree that has survived multiple droughts develops deeper roots, more conservative water use, a physiological memory inscribed in its structure. The past shapes the present, experience informs behavior, and time becomes layered, each year built upon the last, the tree growing not just larger but wiser in a sense, better adapted, more resilient, carrying the lessons of survival in its very tissues. The phenomenon called crown shyness is one of the most visually striking examples of plants sensing and responding to their neighbors. In certain forest canopies, the tops of trees don't quite touch. Instead, they maintain narrow gaps between their crowns, creating a puzzle-like pattern of foliage separated by channels of sky. Several mechanisms may contribute to crown shyness. Trees may sense the abrading touch of neighboring branches in the wind and inhibit growth in those directions, or they may detect the light quality changes that indicate a neighbor is near and adjust their growth accordingly. The result is a canopy where each tree maintains its own space, where competition is managed through spacing rather than overgrowth, where the forest becomes a mosaic of individuals that somehow cooperate in division. From below, looking up through these forests, the gaps form luminous rivers in the green ceiling, a visible manifestation of botanical boundaries, of trees knowing where they end and their neighbors begin. Plants can count, at least in specific contexts, which pushes our understanding of plant capabilities into surprising territory. Beyond the Venus flytrap counting touches, researchers have found that other plants track quantities in functional ways. Some plants require a certain cumulative exposure to cold or light before flowering, effectively integrating a signal over time, a form of counting days or hours. Others track the number of sequential stress events, with responses escalating if stressors repeat. The mechanisms involve gene expression loops, protein accumulation thresholds, and feedback circuits that can maintain a cellular tally of how many times something has happened. It's not abstract mathematics, not conscious enumeration, but it is quantitative information processing. A plant keeping track of how many, how much, how long, and adjusting its development accordingly. The notion that counting requires consciousness dissolves a little when we see that even cells can keep score, that accumulation itself is a form of memory, that life found ways to track quantity long before brains emerged to ponder numbers. Allelopathy is chemical communication with an aggressive edge, plants releasing compounds into the soil that inhibit the growth of competing plants nearby. The black walnut tree is notorious for this. Its roots release juglone, a chemical toxic to many other plant species, creating a zone around the tree where few competitors can survive. This gives the walnut more access to water, nutrients, and light, a chemical clearing in the forest. Some invasive species use allelopathy as a weapon in new territories, producing compounds that native plants haven't evolved defenses against, giving the invader an overwhelming advantage. This is chemical warfare on a botanical timescale. Not bombs and bullets, but slow poison leaching into soil, reshaping the community around the allelopathic plant. Its competition made chemical, territorial behavior without territory marking, aggression without anger, the plant altering its environment to favor its own survival at the expense of others. When a seed germinates, it makes one of the most critical decisions of its life, though calling it a decision feels anthropomorphic. The seed must assess conditions and determine whether to germinate now or wait. If the seed breaks dormancy too early, before the last frost, before adequate moisture is available, before the season is truly right, the young seedling may die. So seeds have evolved exquisite sensing mechanisms, often requiring multiple environmental cues to align before germination proceeds. Many seeds need a period of cold stratification, simulating winter, followed by warmth and moisture, simulating spring. Others require specific light conditions, detecting canopy openings by the quality of light that reaches the forest floor. Still others require passage through an animal's digestive system or exposure to smoke from a fire. Each species has its own lock, and the environment must provide the right combination of keys. This is risk management, patience encoded in biology, the seed waiting for the most auspicious moment to gamble on life, holding potential in suspension until the world says yes. Plant roots exude an astonishing diversity of chemicals into the surrounding soil: sugars, amino acids, organic acids, enzymes, mucilage, and countless secondary compounds. This exudation is costly. The plant is leaking valuable resources into the ground. Yet it serves many functions. The exudates can alter soil pH to mobilize nutrients, attract beneficial microbes that aid in nutrient acquisition or disease resistance, signal to symbiotic fungi to initiate partnerships, deter pathogenic organisms, and even influence neighboring plant roots. The rhizosphere, the zone of soil directly influenced by root exudates, is a hotspot of biological activity, a chemical marketplace where plants negotiate with microbes and other plants, where resources are traded and alliances formed. In this way, the root is not just an organ of absorption, but an organ of communication, secreting a chemical vocabulary into the soil, shaping the microbial community to the plant's benefit, engineering the underground environment through chemistry. Plants can adapt their photosynthetic machinery to different light environments with remarkable precision. A shade leaf, grown in the dim understory, has different anatomy than a sun leaf from the canopy. It's thinner, has more chlorophyll per unit area, and is optimized to capture scarce photons efficiently. If that shade leaf is suddenly exposed to full sun, it can sustain damage from the overload of light energy. But plants aren't helpless. They can adjust. Within days to weeks, the plant can remodel its leaf structure, biochemistry, and photosynthetic apparatus to match the new light environment. This plasticity is driven by the plant sensing light quality and quantity through its photoreceptors, triggering changes in gene expression that alter cell division, chloroplast number and structure, pigment composition, and enzyme concentrations. It's adaptation in real time, the plant reshaping itself to fit the environment, a kind of learning where the lesson is written in tissue structure and metabolic capacity, where the plant becomes different to survive. The relationship between plants and their pollinators is a conversation millions of years old, written in color and scent and shape. Flowers have evolved to attract specific pollinators: bees, butterflies, moths, birds, bats, even beetles and flies, through signals tuned to each pollinator's senses. Bee-pollinated flowers often have UV patterns invisible to us but brilliant to bees, nectar guides that point the way to rewards. Moth-pollinated flowers bloom at night, pale and fragrant, beacons in darkness. Bird-pollinated flowers are often red, a color birds see well but bees largely ignore, with sturdy structures to support perching. The plant is communicating, advertising, promising resources in exchange for the service of carrying pollen. And the pollinator is listening, reading the signals, making choices about which flowers to visit. It's a mutualism where both parties benefit, yet also an arms race where plants evolve defenses against nectar thieves and pollinators, evolve strategies to exploit plants. The result is diversity, a riotous explosion of flower forms, each one a solution to the problem of reproduction, each one a signal sent across the kingdom boundary from plant to animal. Stomata, the tiny pores on leaf surfaces, open and close in response to light, humidity, carbon dioxide concentration, and water availability, balancing the plant's need to take in CO2 for photosynthesis against the need to conserve water. This opening and closing is controlled by guard cells that surround each pore, swelling and shrinking to adjust the aperture. What's remarkable is that this is happening across thousands or millions of stomata on each leaf, yet the responses are coordinated, the leaf acting as a whole to optimize gas exchange. The guard cells sense blue light, triggering ion pumps that draw potassium into the cells, followed by water, causing the cells to swell and the pore to open. When the plant detects drought stress, it releases abscisic acid, a hormone that triggers stomatal closure, prioritizing water conservation over carbon gain. This is real-time resource management, each stoma making local decisions that sum to leaf-level and plant-level optimization, distributed intelligence emerging from the coordinated action of countless microscopic valves. The process of flowering is a profound developmental transition, a shift from vegetative growth to reproduction, and it's exquisitely timed to environmental and internal cues. Photoperiod is often the master cue. Short-day plants flower when nights grow long, long-day plants when nights are short, and day-neutral plants respond to other factors like age or stress. The plant measures night length through photoreceptors and circadian clock mechanisms, effectively consulting an internal calendar. Some plants also require vernalization, a winter chilling period, ensuring they don't flower in autumn only to have their seeds face winter. Others respond to drought or nutrient stress, a strategy of panic flowering when conditions deteriorate, a last-ditch effort to reproduce before death. The decision to flower is irreversible and all-consuming. Resources are diverted, growth patterns shift, the entire body plan changes. It's the plant's acknowledgement that its time has come, that it must now gamble everything on the next generation, a biological commitment driven by the integration of season, memory, and internal state. Plants repair themselves constantly, healing wounds, replacing damaged tissues, growing around obstacles. Unlike most animals where adult form is fixed, plants exhibit indeterminate growth. They keep adding new modules, new leaves and roots and branches throughout their lives. If a branch is broken, the tree can seal the wound with callous tissue, may reroute nutrients around the damage, and continues growing. Root tips damaged by obstacles simply grow new roots from nearby locations. A tree can lose half its branches to a storm and over years, rebuild its canopy. This modularity, this ability to lose parts without losing life, is a form of resilience that shapes plant strategy. A plant can be partially eaten, partially burned, partially broken and survive, regrow, persist. Damage is not catastrophe but information, input that the plant integrates and responds to, reallocating resources, adjusting priorities, carrying on. In this way, plants teach a kind of patience, an acceptance of loss and imperfection, a capacity to continue despite harm. The relationship between plants and soil microbes is so intimate that it's increasingly difficult to say where the plant ends and the microbial community begins. The rhizosphere microbiome, the community of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms living in close association with roots, can influence plant health, growth, stress tolerance, and even the nutritional quality of the plant's tissues. Plants actively recruit beneficial microbes through root exudates, creating a customized microbial environment. In return, these microbes fix nitrogen, solubilize phosphorus, produce hormones that promote growth, outcompete pathogens, and even prime the plant's immune system. Some researchers speak of the plant microbiome holobiont, a functional unit where plant and microbes are partners, where the genes of the microbiome extend the capabilities of the plant. It's a reminder that individuality is fuzzy, that organisms exist in communities, that cooperation at the microscopic scale shapes what we see at the scale of stems and leaves. Plants can recognize and respond to volatile compounds released by herbivores themselves, not just by damaged plants. The smell of insect saliva, the pheromones released by mating moths, the odors of spider mites, all can trigger defensive responses in plants. In some cases, plants ramp up production of extrafloral nectar, a sugary secretion outside the flowers that attracts ants and other predators that defend the plant from herbivores. This is the plant saying, "I detect a threat and I'm hiring bodyguards, paying in sugar for protection services." The plant doesn't know it's doing this in any conscious sense, but the functional outcome is clear. Plants that can detect herbivore cues early and recruit predators suffer less damage and produce more seeds. It's an example of indirect defense, of plants manipulating their ecological community to their benefit, of green intelligence manifesting not as thought but as strategy encoded in genes, refined by selection, expressed in chemistry and behavior. Let your breathing slow, let your body sink a little deeper into the mattress. There's a quiet growing feeling, isn't there, that the world is more connected than we usually notice. Plants connected to fungi, connected to soil, connected to insects, connected back to plants in an endless, intricate web. You're part of that web too, breathing oxygen produced by green leaves, eating food that ultimately traces back to photosynthesis. But tonight, you don't need to think about that. Tonight, you can just drift, just rest, letting the gentle rhythm of facts and silence carry you deeper into the soft arms of sleep. Some plants exhibit circumnutation, a spiral or elliptical movement as they grow, the shoot or tendril sweeping through space as if searching. Darwin studied this too, attaching tiny needles to plant tips and tracking their motion, discovering that many plants are constantly moving in slow spirals, probing their environment. For climbing plants, this circumnutation becomes a search strategy. The tendril waves through three-dimensional space until it touches a support, then coils around it. The movement is driven by differential growth rates on opposite sides of the stem or tendril, a dynamic imbalance that creates continuous motion. It's growth as exploration, the plant feeling its way through space, extending and searching, trying different directions, responding to what it finds. And in time-lapse footage, where hours compress to seconds, These movements are mesmerizing. Plants look active, questing, almost animal-like in their restlessness, a reminder that the boundary between motion and stillness is a matter of time scale. Plants have immune systems, not like yours with antibodies and white blood cells, but functionally analogous systems for recognizing and defending against pathogens. Pattern recognition receptors on plant cell surfaces detect conserved molecular signatures of bacteria, fungi, and viruses, pathogen-associated molecular patterns. When these receptors are triggered, signaling cascades activate defense genes, producing antimicrobial compounds, strengthening cell walls, sometimes triggering localized cell death to wall off the infection. There's even a form of systemic acquired resistance, where infection in one part of the plant primes the entire plant for faster, stronger responses to subsequent infections, a kind of immunological memory. And plants can distinguish between different types of attackers, mounting tailored responses to specific pathogens. It's a sophisticated defense system operating without adaptive immunity, without memory cells, yet achieving similar outcomes: recognition, response, and a form of learned resistance. The architecture of a tree is a record of its life, a physical diary written in wood and branch angles. Branches emerge at angles determined by hormones and genetic programming, but their subsequent growth is shaped by light, by competition with neighbors, by the prevailing winds, by damage and recovery. A tree growing alone in a field develops a broad, symmetrical crown. The same species in a dense forest grows tall and narrow, racing for canopy space, lower branches shaded out and dying, creating a tall trunk with a small crown at the top. Foresters can read tree form like a text. Leaning trunks indicate past landslides or persistent wind. Crooked trunks reveal the struggle to find light. Branch scars tell of storm damage. Burls indicate chronic stress or injury. Each tree is unique, shaped by the particular circumstances of its life, an individual even while conforming to the general strategy of its species. Resurrection plants can survive extreme desiccation, losing up to 95% of their water content, appearing dead, brown, and brittle, yet returning to life within hours when water becomes available again. During desiccation, these plants produce protective compounds, dismantle cellular structures in controlled ways, and enter a state of suspended animation. Their metabolism stops, no biochemical reactions occur, yet the cells remain intact, poised to resume function. When water returns, membranes reform, proteins refold, photosynthesis restarts, and the brown, curled leaves unfurl and turn green, as if nothing happened. This is survival at the edge of life, a demonstration that life is not a constant state but a process, something that can pause and resume. For the resurrection plant, death is not a boundary but a temporary condition, a state from which return is possible, a strategy that allows life in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Plants respond to magnetic fields, though the functional significance is still being unraveled. Roots and shoots can detect the direction and intensity of Earth's magnetic field and use it as a cue for orientation. Some experiments suggest that magnetic fields influence seed germination rates, root growth direction, and even the plane of cell division. The mechanisms likely involve specialized proteins, cryptochromes, that undergo changes in the presence of magnetic fields, potentially providing the plant with a sensory modality we barely understand. It's a reminder of how much we still don't know, how many environmental cues plants might be responding to that remain invisible to us, how the sensory world of plants is richer, stranger, more complex than our own limited senses reveal. The diurnal movement of leaves, opening during the day, closing at night, or tracking the sun across the sky, is driven by changes in turgor pressure in specialized cells at the base of leaves or leaflets, called pulvini. These cells pump potassium ions in and out, water follows, and the resulting swelling or shrinking causes the leaf to move. It's not growth-driven like phototropism but reversible hydraulic motion, sometimes rapid enough to see in real time. Prayer plants fold their leaves upward at night. Sunflowers track the sun from east to west during the day, then reorient eastward during the night, ready for dawn. This sun tracking, or heliotropism, increases photosynthesis and also warms the flowers, attracting more pollinators. The mechanism involves the circadian clock, photoreceptors, and differential growth on opposite sides of the stem during the day, followed by rebalancing at night. The plant is choreographing its posture in time with the sun, a daily dance that maximizes energy capture and reproductive success. Some plants can count days, or at least measure the passage of time across days with precision. The timing of flowering often depends on experiencing a certain duration of specific photoperiods, not just detecting that days are short or long, but integrating this information over many days or weeks. The plant must have internal counters or integrators, biochemical systems that accumulate a signal each day until a threshold is reached. One model involves the daily rhythm of a clock protein that activates a flowering promoter protein. The promoter accumulates each day, and when it crosses a certain concentration threshold, flowering is initiated. This is temporal integration, a way of counting sunrises and sunsets without a calendar, a way of knowing that winter has been long enough, that spring is truly here to stay, that it's safe to flower. The concept of plant stress is useful but anthropomorphic. When we say a plant is stressed by drought or heat or attack, we mean its homeostasis is disrupted, its normal functioning impaired, but the plant doesn't feel distress. Yet the plant does respond in ways that look like coping, activating stress-responsive genes, producing protective compounds, reallocating resources, entering dormancy. Chronic stress can stunt growth, reduce reproduction, shorten lifespan. In this way, stress is real for plants even without the subjective experience of suffering. It's a reminder that biological stress, the objective disruption of function, doesn't require consciousness. And it makes us wonder about the nature of our own stress, how much of it is the objective disruption and how much is the subjective interpretation, the story we tell about the disruption. Grafting is an ancient horticultural practice where tissues from two plants are joined so they grow as one. A rootstock provides the root system, chosen for vigor or disease resistance or climate adaptation. A scion provides the above-ground portion, chosen for fruit quality or flower beauty. The two parts, sometimes from different varieties or even different species, fuse at the graft union and vascular tissues connect, allowing water and nutrients to flow from rootstock to scion and sugars to flow from scion to rootstock. What's remarkable is that the two parts retain their genetic identities. The roots are one genotype, the shoots another, yet they function as a single organism, coordinated and cooperative. Information flows across the graft union too. Hormones, signaling molecules, even RNA and proteins, allowing communication between the two partners. It's a living chimera, a collaboration at the most intimate level, each partner contributing its strengths to the shared whole. The symbiosis between legumes and nitrogen-fixing bacteria is one of the most important partnerships on Earth. Legume roots form nodules housing rhizobium bacteria, which convert atmospheric nitrogen gas into ammonia that the plant can use. In exchange, the plant supplies the bacteria with sugars produced by photosynthesis. The establishment of this symbiosis is a sophisticated negotiation. The plant releases flavonoids into the soil, attracting compatible bacteria. The bacteria respond with signaling molecules that trigger nodule formation. The plant allows the bacteria to enter root cells, then modifies those cells to create a hospitable environment. It's mutual aid, cooperation across kingdoms, neither partner able to achieve nitrogen fixation alone, but together transforming an inert gas into the building blocks of proteins and nucleic acids, enriching the soil, fueling ecosystems. Plants can detect and respond to electrical fields. Flowers often have a slight negative charge relative to the air, and bees develop a positive charge as they fly. When a bee approaches a flower, the electric field can change detectably, and plants may use this as a cue that a pollinator is near, potentially altering nectar production or volatile emissions in response. There's also evidence that plant roots generate electrical potentials as they grow, and these fields might influence the growth direction of neighboring roots or interact with charged soil particles. The electric dimension of plant life is only beginning to be explored, another layer of sensory experience, another channel of communication, another way plants are embedded in the physical world. Some plants are viviparous, producing seeds that germinate while still attached to the parent plant. Mangroves do this, growing long, spear-like seedlings that eventually drop from the parent and stick into the mud below or float away to distant shores. This strategy bypasses the vulnerable seed stage, giving the offspring a head start, already a functioning photosynthetic plant when it establishes. It's a different life history strategy, a way of being that blurs the boundary between generations. Where does the parent end and the offspring begin when the offspring grows from the parent's body, nourished by the parent's resources, before separating? It's life giving rise to life directly. Continuity made visible, generation flowing into generation without the pause of dormancy. The smell of cut grass, that fresh, green, summery scent, is actually a chemical distress signal. When grass is mowed, the damaged cells release green leaf volatiles, compounds that attract predators of herbivores and prime neighboring plants for attack. We find the smell pleasant, nostalgic even, but we're eavesdropping on a chemical alarm, a broadcast of damage, a call for help. It's a reminder that our interpretations of plant signals are filtered through our own senses and experiences, that what smells sweet to us may be a scream to a plant, that the green world is full of conversations we're only beginning to translate. Plants compete for light with extraordinary sensitivity, detecting the red to far red light ratio that indicates nearby vegetation. When a plant is shaded by neighbors, it receives less red light and relatively more far red light, which has been filtered through or reflected off the chlorophyll of competing plants. Phytochrome photoreceptors detect this change, and the plant responds with shade avoidance syndrome, elongated stems, reduced branching, accelerated flowering. The plant is trying to grow taller faster to overtop the competition, to reach unfiltered sun. It's a race, and the plant that detects shade early and responds vigorously has a better chance of winning. Competition is constant and green, unfolding in slow motion, measured in centimeters of stem and square centimeters of leaf area. The flowers of some plants track the sun not for photosynthesis, but to warm their reproductive structures, attracting cold-blooded pollinators. Arctic poppies are a beautiful example. Their bowl-shaped flowers act as solar collectors, focusing warmth onto the developing seeds at the center. Insects visiting these flowers are warmed by the concentrated solar heat, allowing them to fly in the cold Arctic air, and in return they pollinate the flowers. The flowers continuously reorient to track the sun across the sky, maximizing heat accumulation. It's engineering architecture, a functional design that solves the problem of reproduction in a cold climate through form and movement. Plant hormones, auxins, cytokinins, gibberellins, abscisic acid, ethylene, and others, are the chemical messengers that coordinate plant development and responses. But unlike animal hormones produced in discrete glands, plant hormones are synthesized in many tissues, and their effects depend on concentration, ratios between different hormones, the developmental stage of the tissue, and interactions with environmental signals. The same hormone can have opposite effects in different contexts. Auxin promotes growth in stems, but inhibits growth in roots. Ethylene triggers fruit ripening but also stress responses. This context dependency, this hormonal crosstalk, creates a flexible, integrated regulatory system that allows the plant to respond appropriately to a complex, changing environment. The plant is conducting a chemical symphony, adjusting the balance of signals to produce coordinated development. Seeds can remain viable for astonishing lengths of time. Seeds buried in permafrost have germinated after thousands of years. Seeds stored in seed banks maintain viability for decades or centuries under the right conditions. This is suspended time, potential held in stasis, life waiting. A seed is a time capsule containing not just an embryo but also stored nutrients, genetic instructions, and sometimes epigenetic memories of parental stress. When conditions are right, this capsule opens, and what was preserved in stillness becomes growth, movement, life unfolding. The seed doesn't experience this passage of time. For the embryo, millennia can pass in an instant, the frozen moment between maturation and germination. Plants can alter their leaf chemistry based on herbivore damage in remarkably specific ways. Some plants increase the production of protease inhibitors that interfere with herbivore digestion. Others produce compounds that are actually activated into toxins by the herbivore's own digestive enzymes, a kind of chemical trap. Still others change the amino acid composition of their tissues to make them nutritionally imbalanced for herbivores. And some plants can recognize the specific herbivore attacking them based on chemical cues in the insect's saliva and tailor their defensive response to that particular enemy, producing compounds especially effective against that herbivore. It's adaptive precision, chemical warfare refined by evolution into a diverse arsenal, each weapon effective against specific threats. How are you feeling now? Perhaps your eyelids are heavy, your thoughts beginning to blur at the edges. That's perfect. There's nothing to chase, nothing to achieve. The plants we're exploring don't strive or stress. They simply grow, respond, exist in patient cycles. You can borrow that patience now. Let the words continue if you like, or let them fade into background, into texture, into the soft fabric of sleep. Either way, you're exactly where you need to be. Plants can produce methane, a discovery that surprised researchers because methane production was thought to require anaerobic conditions and methanogenic microbes. Yet plants under stress, especially in sunlight, release small amounts of methane through mechanisms that are still not fully understood. This has implications for global methane budgets and climate models, a reminder that ecosystems are full of surprises, that plants participate in global biogeochemical cycles in ways we're still discovering. The living world is more complex than our models, always exceeding our attempts to fully account for it. Some plants flower only once in their lifetime, putting all their resources into a single massive reproductive event, then dying. Bamboo is famous for this. Some species grow vegetatively for decades, even a century. Then all individuals across vast regions flower synchronously, produce seeds and die. This synchronous flowering may overwhelm seed predators, ensuring some seeds survive, or it may be a consequence of internal clocks running across decades. Either way, it's a life history of patience and sacrifice, the individual plant existing only to prepare for one moment of reproduction, after which its purpose is fulfilled. It's a different relationship with time and death than we're accustomed to, not tragedy but strategy, not loss but completion. The boundary between individual plants can be ambiguous. Some plants spread clonally, sending out runners or rhizomes that produce new shoots, creating what looks like many plants but is genetically one individual. Aspen groves are often single clones, thousands of trunks connected underground, sharing a root system. One aspen clone in Utah, called Pando, is estimated to be 80,000 years old and weighs 6,000 tons, making it one of the oldest and heaviest organisms on Earth. But is it one organism or many? Each trunk can be cut and the others survive. Each trunk grows and responds semi-independently. Yet they share genes, share resources, are physiologically connected. Individuality itself becomes a question, identity distributed across space and time. Plants photosynthesize, converting light energy into chemical energy, building sugars from carbon dioxide and water, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process sustains nearly all life on Earth, directly or indirectly. But photosynthesis is not perfectly efficient. Plants capture only a few % of the light energy that strikes them. Yet in aggregate, photosynthesis produces over 100 billion tons of dry biomass annually, an astonishing creative act, turning sunlight into substance. When you eat a carrot or an apple, you're eating captured sunlight, transformed by green alchemy into matter. The plant is a bridge between the nuclear furnace of the sun and your own metabolism, a transformer of energy, a builder of the biosphere. Some plants are resurrection annuals, spending most of the year as dormant seeds, then germinating, growing, flowering, and setting seed all within a few weeks when rains come. Desert ephemerals do this, carpeting arid landscapes in sudden blooms after rare rainfalls. Their entire life cycle is a sprint, compressed into the brief window when conditions permit. Then they return to seed, to waiting, to dormancy that may last years. It's boom and bust, feast and famine, patience and urgency combined. A life strategy adapted to unpredictable, extreme environments where the only certainty is uncertainty. Plants have been called sessile animals by some researchers, emphasizing that despite being rooted in place, plants face many of the same challenges animals do: finding resources, competing, defending against predators and pathogens, reproducing, and have evolved sophisticated solutions without mobility. Roots forage through soil much like animals forage above ground, proliferating in resource-rich patches, avoiding competitors or toxins. Leaves adjust their angles and chlorophyll content to optimize light capture like animals adjusting their behavior to optimize foraging. Defense chemicals and structures serve the role of flight or camouflage. The sessile lifestyle places different constraints, demands different solutions, but the functional challenges are similar. Intelligence, in the broad sense of adaptive information processing, emerges in both kingdoms, shaped by selection to solve the problems of survival and reproduction. The growth of a plant is an emergent property of thousands of individual cell decisions: when to divide, when to elongate, when to differentiate into specific cell types. Each cell responds to local signals, hormonal gradients, mechanical stresses, chemical cues from neighbors, yet the outcome is a coordinated organ, a root growing in a particular direction, a leaf unfolding with a specific shape. There's no blueprint, no central controller issuing instructions. Instead, form arises from the local interactions of cells following simple rules that, in aggregate, produce complex functional structures. It's self-organization, order emerging from decentralized processes, a reminder that complexity doesn't require top-down control. Certain plants can hyperaccumulate heavy metals from the soil, concentrating nickel, zinc, cadmium, or other metals in their tissues at levels that would be toxic to most organisms. These plants use specialized proteins and cellular structures to sequester the metals safely, and the strategy may defend against herbivores or pathogens, suppress competing plants, or simply tolerate contaminated soils where others can't grow. Hyperaccumulators are used in phytoremediation, cleaning contaminated sites by extracting pollutants over time. The plant absorbs the poison, holds it, and can be harvested and disposed of, gradually detoxifying the soil. It's alchemy in reverse, transformation not into gold but into safety, plants serving as green machines for healing damaged earth. Deciduous leaves change color in autumn as chlorophyll breaks down, revealing other pigments, carotenoids producing yellows and oranges, and anthocyanins producing reds and purples. The brilliant display is a side effect of senescence, the tree withdrawing nutrients before shedding leaves. But the colors serve a function too. Anthocyanins may protect the leaf during the nutrient retrieval process, shielding it from light damage, allowing more complete recovery of valuable nitrogen and phosphorus. Or the colors may signal to aphids that the tree is well defended, deterring insects from laying eggs on the branches. Autumn color is not mere beauty but biochemistry, strategy, a final act before the leaf falls, a curtain call in red and gold. Plants detect touch with such sensitivity that even the tiny footsteps of insect larvae crawling on a leaf can trigger defense responses. Mechanoreceptor proteins in the cell membrane respond to deformation, initiating calcium waves that propagate through the plant and activate defense genes. This touch sensitivity allows the plant to distinguish between wind, rain, and the threat of herbivory, responding appropriately to each. The plant is feeling its world, constantly, the texture of its environment inscribed in electrical and chemical signals that flow through its tissues, informing every part of the plant what every other part is experiencing. Some plants exhibit paraheliotropism, orienting their leaves away from intense midday sun to reduce heat load and water loss. Others use leaf folding or curling to protect themselves from extreme conditions. The leaves of some desert plants rotate to present their edges to the sun at midday, minimizing the surface area exposed. This is thermoregulation without physiology, temperature control through orientation and architecture, the plant managing its microclimate through movement and form. Even rooted in place, the plant is not passive but constantly adjusting its posture to survive. The coevolution of plants and herbivores has driven the evolution of much of the chemical diversity we see in the plant kingdom. Plants produce thousands of secondary compounds, alkaloids, terpenoids, phenolics, glucosinolates, many of which serve as defenses. Herbivores evolve counteradaptations, enzymes to detoxify plant poisons, sequestration mechanisms to store toxins for their own defense, preference for less defended plants. Plants respond with new defenses, herbivores with new counteradaptations in an endless cycle. This arms race has been running for hundreds of millions of years, driving diversification, innovation, complexity. The chemical richness of plants, many of which we use as medicines and spices, is the legacy of this ancient conflict. Plants can sense when they're being eaten, and the way they sense it is specific to the threat. The vibrations caused by chewing caterpillars produce a distinct frequency, and plants have been shown to respond more strongly to chewing vibration than to wind or other mechanical disturbances. When researchers played recordings of caterpillar chewing to plants, the plants increased their production of defensive chemicals, suggesting the plant can hear, in a sense, the sound of its own destruction and respond accordingly. Its acoustic ecology at the cellular level, vibration as information, the plant tuned to the signature of threat. Epiphytic plants, like many orchids and bromeliads, grow on other plants without parasitizing them, using the host only for support. These plants must acquire water and nutrients from rain, dust, and debris that accumulates around their roots, living in a nutrient-poor, precarious environment. They've evolved specialized structures, water-absorbing scales, tank-like leaf arrangements, thick roots that cling to bark to survive. It's a different way of being a plant, untethered from soil, living in the canopy, part of the vertical diversity of tropical forests. Their existence depends on perceiving and exploiting microclimates, on capturing scarce resources, on living lightly on the shoulders of giants. The growth rate of plants is astonishing when you stop to consider it. Bamboo can grow more than a meter in a single day under optimal conditions, the fastest growing plant on Earth. This growth is powered by cell elongation in the culm, cells rapidly expanding as they take in water, pushing the shoot skyward. You could almost watch it grow if you sat still long enough, a visible expression of the plant's urgency, its race to reach the canopy, to outcompete its neighbors. That such rapid growth happens through cell biology, through turgor pressure and cell wall loosening, through coordinated elongation of millions of cells, is a testament to the power of plant metabolism. Plant reproduction is diverse, creative, sometimes bizarre. Some plants reproduce sexually, some asexually, some both. Some produce millions of tiny seeds dispersed by wind, others a few large seeds dispersed by animals. Some flowers are pollinated by insects, others by wind, birds, bats, water, even mice or lemurs. Some plants self-fertilize, others have elaborate mechanisms to ensure cross-pollination. The strategies reflect different environments, different evolutionary pressures, different trade-offs between investment per offspring and number of offspring. Each strategy is a solution to the challenge of propagation, of sending genes forward through time, of participating in the continuation of life. Root systems are the hidden half of the plant, and they can be enormous. The total length of roots and root hairs in a single plant can exceed thousands of kilometers, a vast surface area for absorbing water and nutrients. Roots constantly grow, explore, die back and regrow, a dynamic underground network responding to patches of nutrients, pockets of moisture, the proximity of other roots. They exude enzymes and acids to break down organic matter and minerals. They form partnerships with fungi and bacteria. They anchor the plant and store reserves. The root system is not subordinate to the shoot but an equal partner, and in some plants, the root biomass exceeds the above-ground biomass. Some plants have evolved to mimic other plants or even animals. Bequilla trifoliolata, a South American vine, can change its leaf shape and size to match the foliage of the tree it's climbing, a form of camouflage that may reduce herbivory. If the vine's leaves look like the well-defended host tree's leaves, herbivores may avoid them. How the plant detects and matches the host's leaves is unknown. It's a mystery that challenges our understanding of plant perception. Other plants produce flowers that mimic female insects, attracting male insects that attempt to mate with the flower and in the process, transfer pollen. These are strategies of deception, plants manipulating the perceptions of other organisms to their benefit, advertising something they're not, exploiting the sensory systems of animals. You've come so far through this forest of facts, this garden of ideas. Your mind has wandered through root systems and flower shapes, through chemical signals and electrical currents, through time scales vast and tiny. And maybe you've noticed that you're feeling calmer now, quieter, more at ease. That's the gift of slow knowledge, of soft science, of letting your thoughts roam in green spaces. Keep breathing, keep resting, keep allowing yourself to drift. The plants aren't going anywhere. They'll still be there tomorrow, growing slowly, patiently, waiting for you to notice them again. Germination is a moment of high risk. The seed gives up its dormancy, commits its stored resources to growth, and the young seedling is vulnerable, soft, inexperienced. Yet seeds are equipped with sophisticated mechanisms to time germination for maximum survival. They integrate multiple environmental cues, avoid false starts, and only commit when conditions are genuinely favorable. This decision-making at the seed level, this biochemical assessment of risk and opportunity, determines whether the next generation succeeds or fails. It's the plant's first act of perception and response, performed in darkness, underground in silence. Vascular plants have two separate transport systems, xylem for water and minerals moving upward from roots, and phloem for sugars moving from photosynthetic tissues to growing or storage tissues. These systems are marvels of biological engineering. Xylem relies on transpiration pull, a column of water drawn upward by evaporation from leaves, held together by hydrogen bonds, capable of lifting water more than 100 meters in the tallest trees. Phloem uses pressure flow, sugars loaded into sieve tubes creating osmotic pressure that pushes sap toward areas of low sugar concentration. No pumps, no hearts, just elegant use of physical principles, cohesion, adhesion, osmosis, to move resources through the plant body. Some plants are proto-carnivorous, exhibiting traits that hint at carnivory but not fully specialized for it. They may have sticky leaves that trap insects incidentally, and the insects decompose and provide some nutrients, but the plants don't actively digest them. These plants may represent evolutionary intermediates, stages on the way to full carnivory, or ecological generalists taking advantage of whatever resources are available. They blur the line between predator and non-predator, reminding us that categories are human constructs, that nature exists in gradients and continuums. Plants have been on land for over 400 million years, and in that time they've transformed the planet. They created soil, stabilized landscapes, altered atmospheric composition, moderated climate, and provided the foundation for terrestrial ecosystems. Animals colonized land in the wake of plants, depending on them for food, shelter, oxygen. The green covering of the continents is a planetary-scale engineering project, the cumulative effect of countless generations of plants growing, photosynthesizing, dying, and being replaced. We live in a world shaped by plants, a green world, and we are downstream of their transformations. Some plants can close their flowers at night or in response to rain, protecting their pollen and nectar from dilution or theft. The mechanism is similar to leaf movements. Turgor changes in cells at the base of petals cause the flower to open or close. Crocuses, tulips, daisies, dandelions, many flowers exhibit this nyctinasty, this sleep movement. Watching time-lapse footage of flowers opening at dawn and closing at dusk, you see them breathing in a sense, pulsing with the rhythm of day and night, participating in the planetary rotation, their lives synchronized with the sun. Plants respire just like animals, consuming oxygen and producing carbon dioxide to break down sugars and release energy. This happens all the time, day and night, in all living tissues. But during the day, photosynthesis outpaces respiration, so the net effect is oxygen production and carbon uptake. At night, without light, respiration continues but photosynthesis stops, so plants consume oxygen and release carbon dioxide. The balance over a day and over a plant's lifetime is positive. Plants produce more oxygen and store more carbon than they consume. But the point is that plants are not just passive producers. They are metabolically active, burning fuel, doing work, living with intensity even if they live slowly. The concept of plant behavior is controversial among scientists, with some arguing that behavior implies volition or consciousness, which plants lack, and others arguing that behavior is simply a response to stimuli that changes the organism's relationship with its environment, which plants clearly do. The debate is partly semantic, partly philosophical, but functionally, plants behave. They respond to stimuli, they adapt, they make choices that affect their survival and reproduction. Whether we call it behavior or simply response is less important than recognizing that plants are active participants in their environments, not passive objects. Some plants can thermogenerate, producing heat through metabolic activity. The skunk cabbage is a famous example, able to maintain its flowering structure at 1535 degrees C, even when air temperatures are below freezing. This heat vaporizes scent compounds that attract pollinators, and may also provide a warm microclimate that rewards early-season insects. The heat is produced in the mitochondria through a process that uncouples respiration from ATP production, burning sugars to produce heat instead of chemical energy. It's a costly strategy, but it extends the flowering season, attracting pollinators before most other flowers are blooming, a temporal niche won through warmth. Phytochromes, the photoreceptors that detect red and far-red light, exist in two interconvertible forms. Red light converts phytochrome to the active form. Far-red light converts it back. The ratio of the two forms provides the plant with information about light quality. Under a canopy, far-red light is enriched, shifting the phytochrome equilibrium and triggering shade avoidance. At the end of the day, as the sun sets, far-red light is also enriched, and this twilight signal helps the plant track day length. The phytochrome system is elegant, a single molecule acting as both sensor and memory, integrating light information over time and space to inform developmental decisions. Plants have been used by humans for tens of thousands of years as food, medicine, fiber, fuel, building materials, dyes, poisons, and intoxicants. Our civilizations are built on agriculture, on the domestication of plants, on the selection and breeding of crops from wild ancestors. We've shaped plants to suit our needs, and they've shaped us too. Our cultures, our migrations, our wars and trade routes, our very bodies adapted to diets rich in plant starches and fibers. The relationship is mutual, ancient, foundational. We are in many ways products of the plants we cultivate. Plants don't have central nervous systems, but they do have networks, vascular networks, mycorrhizal networks, signaling networks within and between cells. Information flows through these networks, and the plant state at any moment is the emergent product of countless local interactions. This distributed intelligence, this network-based information processing, might be a better model for plant cognition than anything resembling a brain. The plant as a whole perceives and responds, but there's no single location where perception happens, no command center. It's democracy at the cellular level, consensus emerging from multitude. The flowers and fruits we enjoy are, from the plant's perspective, organs of reproduction, not gifts. Fruits are ovaries swollen with seeds, and the sweet flesh is an inducement for animals to eat the fruit and disperse the seeds. Flowers are advertisements for pollination services. We've co-opted these structures for our pleasure, breeding plants to produce larger, sweeter fruits, more colorful or fragrant flowers, but the underlying logic is reproductive. The beauty we see, the flavors we savor, are evolutionary adaptations to influence animal behavior, and we have been influenced, cultivated by plants even as we cultivate them. Seed dispersal is essential for plant success, allowing offspring to escape competition with parents and siblings, to colonize new habitats, to spread risk across space. Dispersal mechanisms are diverse and creative. Wind-dispersed seeds with wings or parachutes, water-dispersed seeds that float, animal-dispersed seeds with hooks that cling to fur or flesh that entices consumption, explosively dispersed seeds launched by mechanical tension in the fruit. Each mechanism is a small engineering marvel, a structure and strategy shaped by selection to move genes through space, to carry the next generation away from the parent and into the future. Some plants can adjust their reproductive strategy based on environmental conditions, producing more seeds when conditions are good, investing in fewer, larger seeds when resources are scarce, allocating more to male versus female function, depending on the availability of mates and pollinators. This plasticity allows the plant to optimize its reproductive output in variable environments, to make the most of good years and survive bad ones. Its flexibility written into the genome conditional strategies that respond to the state of the world, ensuring the plant participates in reproduction regardless of circumstances. Plants can survive herbivory, drought, fire, freezing, disease, and competition, but not indefinitely. Every stress, every injury has a cost. Resources spent on defense are not available for growth. Energy diverted to repair cannot be used for reproduction. Over time, accumulated damage, chronic stress, or simply the aging process weakens the plant. Eventually, the cost exceeds the capacity and the plant dies. Death is not failure but the end of an individual's strategy, and if the plant has reproduced, its genes continue in its offspring, its evolutionary lineage persisting even as the individual ends. The question of whether plants can think is ultimately a question about what thinking is. If thinking requires neurons, subjective experience, consciousness as we know it, then plants do not think. But if thinking is broadly defined as information processing, integration of sensory inputs, adaptive decision-making, learning, and memory, then plants exhibit many of these features in different forms. Perhaps the more interesting question is not whether plants think, but what kinds of intelligence are possible, how many ways life has found to perceive, respond, and adapt. Plants teach us that intelligence is not monolithic, that minds are not the only path to sophisticated behavior. Plants are patient. A tree can wait decades for the right conditions to produce a large seed crop. A desert seed can wait years for rain. A perennial plant can endure winters, droughts, fires, and bounce back season after season. This patience is not virtue but strategy, an adaptation to environments where conditions fluctuate and only the patient survive. There's no frustration in waiting, no impatience, just dormancy and readiness. And perhaps there's a lesson here for us, a reminder that some things cannot be rushed, that waiting is sometimes the wisest action, that patience is woven into the fabric of life. We are surrounded by plants, often barely noticing them. They are the background of our lives, the green blur outside the window, the houseplant in the corner, the vegetables on our plates. But each one is a living organism, sensing and responding, growing and reproducing, a continuation of ancient lineages stretching back hundreds of millions of years. Each plant is solving the problem of survival in its own way, participating in ecosystems, shaping environments, connected to countless other organisms. And now, having explored these facts, maybe you'll see plants a little differently, not as scenery but as beings, not as objects but as actors in the grand drama of life on Earth. So here we are, at the end of our gentle journey through the question of whether plants can think. And maybe the answer, as with so many deep questions, is both yes and no, depending on how you frame it, what you mean by thinking, where you draw the lines. Plants don't have minds like ours. They don't ponder or worry or dream. But they perceive their world with exquisite sensitivity. They process information and respond adaptively. They learn and remember in ways that shape their survival. They communicate, cooperate, compete, and adapt. They are far from passive, far from simple, far from the silent, unchanging background we often take them to be. In a way, plants remind us that intelligence can wear many faces. We're so accustomed to equating intelligence with brains, with neurons, with the rapid-fire thinking we experience in our own minds, that we sometimes forget life has been solving problems for billions of years in countless ways. The green intelligence of plants is slower, more diffuse, more patient, embedded not in a central organ but distributed throughout the organism. It's an intelligence of chemistry and electricity and growth, of roots exploring soil and leaves tracking the sun, of signals shared through networks underground and through the air. It's intelligence without consciousness, strategy without intent, wisdom without awareness. And perhaps that's the most soothing realization of all, the thought to carry with you into sleep, that the world is full of forms of awareness we're only beginning to understand, that life finds ways to sense and respond and thrive in every corner of this planet, that the boundary between the thinking and the non-thinking is far more blurred and beautiful than we imagined. The forest is not a collection of inert objects, but a community of responsive beings, each one participating in its own way, each one connected to all the others through webs visible and invisible. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you might imagine yourself as part of that web, breathing oxygen produced by plants, sustained by food that traces back to photosynthesis, your body itself built from atoms cycled through countless organisms over deep time. You are not separate from the green world but woven into it, part of the same planetary story, the same experiments in survival and complexity. And if plants in their slow, silent way can perceive and respond and remember, then maybe awareness itself is something broader, deeper, older than we thought. Maybe consciousness is not a binary, on or off, present or absent, but a gradient, a spectrum, a quality that exists in different forms across the kingdoms of life. There's something deeply comforting in that idea, isn't there? That the world around us is more aware, more alive, more interconnected than the surface suggests. That even the quietest, slowest organisms are engaged in their own experiences, their own relationships, their own forms of knowing. It makes the world feel less lonely, less mechanical, more like a conversation in which we're one voice among many. As your breathing slows and your thoughts grow softer, let yourself sink into that feeling of connection. You don't need to understand it all, don't need to remember every fact. Just let the sense of wonder settle over you like a warm blanket, the feeling that life is rich and strange, and full of mysteries we've barely begun to explore. The plants will still be there tomorrow, still growing, still sensing, still weaving the green fabric of the world. And you can visit them again, in a garden or a forest or even just in your imagination, and marvel at how much is happening in that quiet, patient, ancient realm. Thank you for spending this time here, for letting me share these gentle facts with you, for bringing your curiosity and your willingness to slow down. If you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing so we can wander through more questions together, more mysteries, more soothing explorations of the world we share. And if you found this helpful, a like or a comment lets me know and helps other sleepy minds find their way here too. But for now, there's nothing left to do. You've arrived. You've traveled through forests of information, across fields of facts, and now you're here at the edge of sleep, ready to let go. So take one more slow breath. Let your muscles relax completely. Let your thoughts dissolve into the darkness behind your eyelids. The plants are growing out there in the world, silent and steady, and you can grow toward sleep in the same way. Without effort, without force, just letting it happen, trusting the process, sinking deeper and deeper into rest. Sleep well, dear listener. The green world will be waiting when you wake.